All right, let's get to the issues now. Political campaigns for the 2023 elections are in full swing, and Nigerians have been trooping out to show support for their preferred candidates. The campaign season is a time for political parties and their flag bearers to move around the country, telling Nigerians what they have to offer so as to convince as many as possible to buy into their ideologies and ideas and programs and manifestos. But beyond the campaigns lies the issue of safety and security during these events. Now, in some cases, campaign rallies may be peaceful, but at other times, it may become chaotic and dangerous. Incidents like stampede, riot, thuggery are common during campaigns, and some persons have lost their lives in such situations in the past. How will Nigerians keep safe as campaigns get more intense? This is the crux of all, and we have in the studio security protection analyst Oluwafemi Aratokun. Ali, it's nice to have you join us in the studio.
Thank you so much
Welcome.
for having me. Good morning, guys.
And joining us via Zoom is the founder and chief executive officer, Beacon Consulting Limited, Dr. Kabir Adamu. It's nice to have you, Dr. Adamu. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. The pleasure is mine.
Great. Now, let's begin from the studio, Femi. Well, it's good to have you home. Anyway, it's good to have you home.
I've been home going
well
for
done.
now.
Now, but we're approaching the campaigns. What signs should we be looking out for when it comes to the safety in campaigns and so on? Because this is a time where the place becomes a kind of rowdy. Some people are excited from taking whatever they take. But then the point there is, what signs should we be looking out for so we can begin to take caution?
I think, good morning, Nigerians, and let's start from this very angle. We have three phases to election.
Okay.
And we have the before, during, and after election. Let's break it down from there. We can see what is actually happening before election now. Now that we have so much going on online, everything going on online on different social media platforms is going to be translated down straight to the physical campaign ground. A lot of people want to take sides based on issues that's happened in the past, based on what people hear and what they want people to believe. So this is exactly what the social media is going to be playing out with. And we need to start asking ourselves this question: from which sources are we getting all this information from? Because a lot of people will digest it, and communication departments, communication companies in Nigeria have got a whole lot of roles to play as well. But how are they going to play this role in such a way that we don't become victims rather than, coming out victorious in whichever way we all plan it? Now, during the election period, what is our level of preparedness? Let's put it that way. Our security officers, are we sanitizing them to understand that this is election period? And during the election period, these are the signs to look out for. These are the possible lockdowns they have to put in place. After the election, how do we bring everybody together? This is the biggest problem that we faced in 2015, 2019. And it might likely, if care is not taken, if we don't put a lot of precautions and measures in place, we blow out, and it might not be something we can control because it's going to pan out to the next election coming.
And talking about preparations, as you rightly alluded to, let me throw this next question to Dr. Adamu, who is joining us from Abuja. Though it's a week now since election campaigns opened, and people have said parties have been off to a slow start on the average, what are you seeing on ground as to how ready we are, or we are going, into the forthcoming election, talking about security?
Thank you very much. So a lot of behind the scene preparations have been going on with INEC itself as the electoral umpire. And then, as you're probably aware, INEC has a committee called the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, which is made up of all the security departments as well as other associated organizations. The CBN, which is not a security organization, is part of that committee. And then there are several other government ministries, departments, and agencies that are part of that committee. So they've held several meetings at the federal level and then sometimes at the regional level. on the platform of that committee. What that committee does is to identify threat factors. We're discussing both safety and security here. So what they do, they identify threat factors. They try to analyze how that threat factors can, bring up risks associated with the elections. And then the more important one is to put in place mitigation measures. Now, they are not likely to announce all of that, even though in some public platforms, some of the content of that has been made public. And I'll give you examples. So the Inspector General of Police, who is the co-chair of that committee, recently in a public statement mentioned what he called quasi-security structures, meaning state-level security arrangement. Now that is a threat to the 2023 elections for the simple reason that these are unconstitutional arrangements. I'm using this word now loosely. I know it's debatable. These are state-level security arrangements that have been created that are not recognized by the Constitution. So as an example, in Kano, you have the Hisba. In the southwest, you have Amotekun. In the southeast, you have Ebubuegu. Now, both the Electoral Act and the Constitution does not recognize the existence of these organizations. Now, what the IG of police was said is that these organizations will attempt to play a role within the elections, but they are not recognized. And so in his honest opinion and his advice to the nation is that for the purposes of the elections, those organizations should not exist. And now that brings in a challenge. They came up on board to provide a service. If the IG says they shouldn't function, then who provides that service within the period that they are not functioning? So anyway, that's one of the risk elements that have been identified that I just thought I should mention. Now, beyond that, all the security departments have been holding conferences, symposiums, training functions for their personnel. So the example I will give is that of the police, as well as the lead agency within the electoral security management space. It has held regional conferences where it attempted to introduce the new elements within the recently passed Electoral Act for election security management to a senior level security personnel. I'm also aware that the military, especially the army, has embarked on a similar exercise. And in fact, it has an operation. I can't recall the name of the operation at the moment. It has also produced a code of conduct for its personnel vis-a-vis their activities within the election security management. So all of that is going behind the scene. I'm also aware that INEC is meeting with logistics officers. Of course, there is a component of both security and safety around logistics. INEC is just yesterday, and I think today, it's meeting with logistics officers to address some of the peculiar security challenges around logistics. So a lot is going behind the scene with the hope of making sure that INEC, as the electoral umpire, the various security departments are prepared and ready to provide an atmosphere that will allow for free, fair elections that would be of integrity.
All right, let me come to the studio. Femi, you have been involved and engaged in training of personnel.
Absolutely.
And one would say that beyond the training of how to handle arms and how to respond, and all of that, is also the issue of assisting and helping people and all of that.
Exactly.
Talk to us how important that is in the mix of things.
From the video clip I just watched, I saw a police officer a bit far away from the polling booth. Now, the question is this. What happens if we have any medical issues around this polling booth? Because it's going to be very rowdy, and some people will probably stay for a longer period of time. Do we understand anyone's health condition? Are we actually putting the medicals in place in any of these polling booths? Even if we're talking about the urban area, what about the remote areas where we might have different kind of insecurities happening? Who caters for them? Now, it's high time we start taking away the idea of hostile training now into protection training, as in the care training program for our security officers. The IG rightly mentioned that the state security agencies are not going to be recognized. Then who is going to do the job?
Regional security
the regional
outfits,
security.
yeah.
So the question is, who is going to do this job for us? How do we ensure that members of the public are safe during the registration and during the voting? So these are key areas, gray areas that no one is talking about.
Wouldn't that be too much if we have to train the same one personnel on how to protect, guide, or guard rather, and then on the other hand, you have to also the same security agent
Mike,
on how to
this is where the volunteers, the youth service corps, a lot of people now are going to come in. All this paramilitary, man-o-war, and the rest, civil defense, and whatever we have. Even some of the private security officers we have around, this is where they need to come in together and start looking into what sort of strategy, what sort of training program do we need? Do we need the fighting power? No, we don't need it. What we need is how do we engage with the member of public so that we can have a peaceful election. These are the things I want to see on ground. And sadly, if they say they're working behind the scene, it is now high time for members of the public to see what is working behind the scene that is going to work for them during
what it
and after, what it translates to.
Right.
So let us start having more like rehearsal, more like simulation programs. We're not seeing all that. I have been into some, past weeks, I've been doing some training programs, and I can understand one thing. A lot of our security personnel don't even understand what first aid and CPR is all about. And this might probably play a part in this very election. There's another angle we're not looking at it from. During the core election week, members of the public will want to go into the bank to withdraw money because of fear of, oh, don't go out, sit at home, and a whole lot of things. It's going to add a whole lot of pressure on the bank staff members, trying to make sure that a lot of people are actually satisfied, sorted out, and all the rest. So what happens to their health? How are we taking care of that angle? We're not looking at that. Now, our event planners, they have a program which I think they need to listen to carefully. Who provides food, welfare for our security agencies at polling stations? This is very key. You know why? Because if police officer or security officer is hungry, trust me, he will just leave that place and go and eat, and anything can happen.
Well, isn't that how it's done usually?
Well,
and if,
where sometimes it seems, you know, they have allowances paid into their accounts, and then at the cost of if you see Bole passing, you just buy.
Okay, now you want to put
as long
parameters.
as you don't leave your,
your duty
guard,
post.
How do you do that? How do you do that? Now you want to make sure that a whole lot of areas are secured, parameters, security layers are put in place. So the question now remains: how do we cater for all this? Who provides what for each? 36 states, different local governments. We have some areas whereby police officers are even like reluctantly going to say, no, I'm not going to go there. So what happens
because they're violence
because
prone?
of violence and a whole lot of things. This might not probably happen within the urban area, but within the local areas, it will happen. And who are those we're going to deploy there? Don't let us forget the anger of students not in schools might probably play a part as well.
Although we pray that before then.
Before then, absolutely seconded. Dr. Adamu, so, okay, campaigns have started and the amended Electoral Act has made, people have said, elaborate provisions about the roles of security agencies, including the police, during rallies, processions, by political parties and even their candidates. How much of a game changer do you see this in terms of adding value to the security subsector when we talk about preparations for the elections?
Okay, so there are several things that would determine that, and but before then, let me just correct an impression. When I responded earlier on, I didn't want to go into the nitty-gritty of it, but as part of the provisions within this Electoral Act that is also being managed by this Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, I'm going to be calling it ICES going forward, just to shorten it. So ICES recognizes that the Electoral Act provides 3 perimeters for security protection. So you can describe it as a ring with 3 sort of cycles. The outer cycle, where you would have the military and other, armed security personnel, such as the MOPO, and then the inner perimeter, where you'd also have armed security personnel, and then the polling booth, where you would not have armed security personnel. So when my co-discussant was talking about issues around safety, first aid and all of that, as mentioned earlier on, ISS has, at the last count, about 24 ministries, securities, and agencies and departments of government. Some of them have to do with safety issues. So as an example, the road safety, as you know, responds to distress situations, provides first aid, and then takes the person to hospital. So I think we need to be measured in our responses and recognize that some of these things are already taken, have been taken into consideration by government. Now, I agree totally with my co-discussant, having this as a policy and then now implementing it are two different things. And that is where the role of the media, the role of the civil society organizations would need to come in to ensure that it's not just a policy, that it is eventually implemented. As an example, in the 2015 and 2019 elections, part of the challenges we had in the code of conduct of these organizations. There was no visible and transparent code of conduct that would allow you as an independent person to say, okay, the road safety as part of its involvement within this election security management played such a role, or the police, or the several other departments. So I'm hoping that the media, civil society organizations will pick this up ahead of the elections, sound it out so that INEC and ISIS as a body would make this code of conduct public, and then we can use that to hold them to account, especially when it comes to issues around safety and security. Now, with regards to the question you asked, yes, there are several determinants. The number one determinant is the conduct of our politicians. I must say at this stage that conduct of our politicians will determine whether we'll have a safe and secure elections more than any other thing. Yes, fake news is crucial in modern day elections. We've seen how the use of the internet has influenced and affected elections. In fact, the outcome of elections, the recently concluded elections in Kenya, the cyberspace played a huge role. So we need to take that into consideration, just like my co-discussant has mentioned. Now, with regards to mobilization, how politicians decide to mobilize voters, if they do positive mobilization, then we're likely to have a positive electoral outcome. If they do negative mobilization, just like we've seen in the past, as far back as 2011 up until 2019, negative mobilization played a huge role. And negative mobilization is such a wide topic, but in essence, what it means is that if you use aspects that would have adverse consequence on our country to mobilize people, and what do I mean? And already, unfortunately, the indicators are there. Ethnicity is one of them. Religion is another one. All of these are positive things, or you could use them negatively. The two parties are currently, major parties, the main opposition party, the People's Democratic Party, and the ruling All Progressives Congress are mired in a controversy around ethnicity and religion. And that is unfortunately an indicator that the mobilization too would go along that line. Now, if they continue using these indices for mobilization, then the likelihood is that people would rally around these major components. There are fault lines within our nation. And that means whoever wins the elections will spend probably a couple of years trying to deal with the consequence of this negative mobilization. And more importantly, before the elections, which is where we are at the moment, during the elections, and then post the elections, there are likely to be conflict issues, including violence around these two major points that I've mentioned. Just to give you an example, yesterday in Jigawa, there was a political rally, and that rally was attacked. I don't want to mention the name of the parties. I don't want to mention the name of the parties that attacked those persons during the rally. And that is what we've seen in several states around the country. And so when we talk of whether the Electoral Act would be helpful in terms of election security management, the major determinant will be the conduct of our political class. But then, and this is like very, very key, the solution to this is in the implementation of the provisions of that Electoral Act. And the good news is that the National Peace Committee has committed our politicians to an accord. Last week, they signed an accord that revolves around this negative mobilization, telling them that there will be consequence And the good thing is that even our international partners are part of this process. So if a politician, for instance, damns the consequences, or he has his assets in the US or in Canada or in, name them, whatever country, and then he's tied to a procedure, a process that led to violence, and then which is in violation of this accord that he signed, there will be consequences. So the media, civil society organizations, we need to pick up on this and do sensitization, advocacy efforts, so that our politicians realize that there will be consequences, first on the basis of the accord they signed, and then on the basis of our laws. The correlation to this, or the second part of this, is that INEC would also need to use the stick. The provisions are there within the Electoral Act. Non-compliance should be met with consequence. If we do that, then the deterrence element will be provided. So in summary, yes, the Electoral Act provides and makes room for some of these consequences, but it would only be effective if we implement the provisions of that act.
All right. Now, Femi, we have seen, in fact, we just held a discussion with the spokesperson of NDLEA, and now talking about the impact of drugs and substances like that during elections. Now, we see the work of NDLEA, how they've been busting here and there, but then, besides what they're doing, which is good, we still have the streets, you know, some of these drugs on the streets and all of that. How does this compound the situation of security during elections?
Well, let me pull up a very short story of what I've experienced during some past elections, and I can tell you that sometimes our politicians are even to be blamed for this, because they want to charge them so that they can perfect some acts, some evil acts. They supply all these drugs as well. We shouldn't shy away from this. So not that most times they have the money to buy it, but they are being supplied to them by some contact, some source that, you know what, this is what we want you to do, this is what we want you to do. So for you to act this way, you need to be high up. You need to have some certain level of courage, strength,
or stimulation.
Stimulation to, I don't want to use that word, to like move in and, you know, get the dirty job done, to motivate them in a certain way that does not really, you know, conform with peaceful process. So if we're talking about drugs, if NDLEA is working, NDLEA should think, who are those supplying those stuffs? From where and what measures are all these stuffs coming from? Those are the areas they need to look into. Not just the users, but the suppliers. And again, the source, the route at which all these stuffs are coming from must be blocked. So those are the areas I want NDLEA to look into. Again, we need to be very careful, especially our Nigerian police force. The use of words, the choice of words. Now, what we're hearing now is some security officers, some security agencies are not recognized. Member of public would definitely use this against some sector in the country today. That, why are you here? You are not recognized. I don't want to listen to you, this one and that one. But what
are
we
you
need to
referring
see,
to the outfits like Amotekun?
yes, Amotekun, Ebibiagu, and not the rest. And what we should understand is this: a lot has gone so wrong. How to move them together, how to let them interchange, you know, coexist together, to make this election a peaceful one is what we should be looking into, not dividing them based on what the IG said. Because
but
the IG
if
statement
before now,
it's a division already.
Just to bring a dimension to it, if before now, the Amotekuns or the Bubiagus have not really been present in the system where the work, what the security agencies have been doing the work they do.
They've been doing it, but they've been overstretched.
Now, how would their absence now
compound
the situation of election?
The absence would definitely now make some dirty politicians, you know, play their dirty tricks. And once, you know, you can't hear a gunshot and think you want to wait. Everybody will disperse and makes them, you know, pick up the ballot boxes, as we've seen in some situation in the past. We don't want all this to happen. So we want some set of people to like, you know what, we want to secure the nation. We want the best for the nation. We want to secure the future of this nation. So we have to be here together. We need to work together. Without good security, there's no good election. Without no good election, there will be no good security. So moving from one and leaving one is not going to be a very good idea. Rather, let us sit down again and look at the drawing, the architectural design, that how can we make this work? We have some areas that we cannot even take our police officers and mopo to. So who are those that are going to be guiding there?
Absolutely.
We're talking about 3 layers of security now.
Right.
The rings are there already. So if you take away the police out from this ring, we have 2 other rings. So who are the 2 architects? Who are the good players that can actually secure the ballot boxes going to riverine areas that we know our security officers, majority of them are not trained on how to secure water areas. So what happens?
Right.
And you don't want to recognize some certain people. So we have a lot of issues at hand that I think we need to think of.
Your point is taken, Olufemi, but let me compare Dr. Adamu's earlier stance with yours, and talking about the issue which has become a familiar path when we prepare for elections, talking about politicians and their parties signing peace accord. So now we're having this, coming on at a fairly earlier stage, and people have, weighed it. But even with the existence of these signings, we still see, concerns. We still see violence breaking out during campaigns, during elections, and even beyond. So what do you think could happen now with this, Nigeria keying deeper into the use of peace accords?
Yeah,
Could this also help? Could this also help us moving forward?
The peace accord will help, but there's one key area that the peace accord seems to have been, that's not been really addressed, let me put it that way, and Dr. Adamu would surely agree with me on this. We've actually had discussion about this. That is the issue of private security close protection officers. We cannot just put all our SPU police to govern around all our presidential candidates and other political candidates. So we still have a big void, and someone, somewhere, must fill all this gap. This is exactly why some sector needs to be trained in how to close protect some major actors, some unknown actors, some actors working behind the scenes, even you guys working within the studio. You are equally as vulnerable as anybody out there because your face is completely out there, and you don't want people to see as if maybe you're taking sides. Now, we don't want to see our security officers taking sides. So we need some highly qualified, trained close protection officers doing some other jobs that our police officers cannot do. Their job is to maintain law and orders, fine. Our road safety officers are to maintain good roadworthy and all the rest. But what happens to when it comes to physical protection of candidates? What happens to the physical protection of members of public coming in thousands to come and vote? These are the gray areas whereby I have my concerns. You can see the long rally and the works and everything going on, but we're not really seeing a very good, robust crowd control to actually control the member of the public with residents, market women, and all the rest. And some set of
in case
funny
there is
people,
even a stampede.
Stampede will happen. The question is this: do we have all this capability, all these devices that we can actually use to make sure that, okay, we'll revive someone quickly without the sudden issue of, oh, sadly, we lost him, we lost this, we lost that. We don't want to see all this, but it's going to play a part, sadly, because in paper, we're ready, but in reality, how ready is INEC? How ready is CDD? How ready are the governors? How ready are the chairman? How ready are the political players across board? Not just APC, PDP, Labour, but all of them all together. How ready are they to make sure that the sanitization is not just within themselves, but it cuts across board? This is my
all right, Dr. Adamu. Let me ask you this. From what Femi is saying. Now, of course, the point there is we have the regional security outfits. The politics of whether it is accepted, is adopted by the federal government or not, that's something beside. But when it comes to being on the field and really carrying out the protection and ensuring safety, what roles do this regional outfits, what difference is it going to make having them contribute to the electoral process on the field?
So a tricky question, but let me answer it in 2 forms. First off, let me approach it from the constitutional, my understanding of the constitutional provision. Currently, security is still in the exclusive list in the Constitution, and so that means any outside the federal level security arrangement is unconstitutional. Now, that there is a lacuna in the Constitution. The lacuna is that the state assemblies still have the powers to legislate And in this instance, they have actually legislated and created some of these state-level security arrangements. So Amotekun, as an example, has the backing of the state, legislation. Likewise, some of the other provisions. There is no state in the country that does not have a state-level security arrangement. Now, I would say that is at the constitutional level. In reality, to respond to your question, there are gaps within our security architecture. Anyone who is being truthful and factual will tell you that there are gaps. The fact that we're having deaths of almost 10,000 annually in the country, it speaks to that. Now, these state-level security arrangements have been created to block that gap. Some of them are doing better than others. A good example is Amotekun. In some locations, the intelligence they are providing, the occupation of certain spaces that are being exploited by non-state actors is quite, functional and useful. We must admit that. However, there is also a danger. Some of the subnational leadership, in this instance, governors, the democratic tenets at the state level is almost non-existent. Some of the governors have behaved like emperors, and unfortunately, they have exhibited qualities that would make one very worried if they have absolute control over the state-level security arrangement. In other words, you have profiled, created stigmatization around an ethnic group, and then now you have control over an armed security wing. What will happen during the elections? Are you going to deny that ethnic group completely the ability to vote because you think all of them are bad? So those are some of the dangers around the state-level security arrangements. And like I said, it's a tricky question in the sense that I do realize professionally that they are playing a function in terms of blocking gaps. But I also see the danger of allowing them to play a role within the elections, especially if the governor, for instance, has an agenda that would affect or mar the desire that we have for an election that is free, fair, and that is seen as one with integrity.
Dr. Adamu, I know we've run out of time, but hopefully I can ask you both quickly, beginning with you, Dr. Adamu, what you think the projection should be and how voters should brace up. And of course, the issue of voter turnout amidst security concerns.
Like we say, security, it's very simple. Three things, the mantra, be aware, and being aware, I mean listening to programs like this, reading up the provisions within the Electoral Act. And then once you are aware, anticipate. So we've talked about the three phases of the elections. What are the dangers at the moment? Mostly the dangers are around election events. If you stay at your home or your business area, they are not likely to be affected. However, during the elections, when you go out to vote, the danger is at the polling booth. And then post-election, depending on how so many things play out, it could be widespread violence. So that is about being aware. If you know all of this, you can determine the risk to you, and then you can take measures to avoid being affected. So be aware, anticipate the risk to you, and then the most important one is the mitigation measures. Once you know the risk, how would you avoid being affected by those risk elements? If it's at the polling booth, you have to now weigh, do you go out to vote or do you save yourself from the troubles of that danger? If you're traveling and you're staying in a hotel where politicians are likely to converge in this period, if I were you, I would think twice about staying in that hotel. I would go to another hotel where, so I mean, like I said, these three things, anticipate, be aware, anticipate, and then put in place mitigation measures. If you need support, there are organizations, private security departments like mine, that would be happy to help, especially corporate organizations, to understand these risk elements and then manage them. For individuals too, we're happy to do that.
And while still with you, Dr. Adamu, in terms of voter turnout, I know that was a mouthful earlier, but in terms of voter turnout, what are your projections?
So it depends on the current level of involvement is quite encouraging, especially during the voter registration exercise. We saw how youth turned out. There is a lot of confidence now. So if that momentum is maintained, and especially the space is made allowed free and fair for all the political parties, 18 of them, to campaign freely and mobilize voters positively. I must emphasize that we should avoid negative mobilization. Then I think, and then again, the security departments will also do a lot if they reassure voters of their safety when they come out to vote.
Right.
So if we do all of that, I think there will be an increase in the voter turnout.
Right, Olufemi.
Okay. Dr. Adamu has said so much. That's so interesting. But there's one key lecture I'm going to give to you so that whenever we have police officers come around, NDLEA and Federal Road Safety officers come around, always let's ask them this question. And this question will give me back to, I'll go down to, a bit of technology for you now. No, in my own security angle, it's called Papa Alpha Papa.
Papa
Alpha Papa. That is PAP. P-A-P.
Okay.
The P simply means positive. The A simply stands for assertiveness. And the P is for professionalism. Okay. The question is, how positive are security officers going to look like, going to be during this election period? Are they going to sit on the fence? Are they going to probably swing left or swing right or take sides? Then the assertiveness simply means, how are they going to assure everyone that, look, we're for you, we're not for this, we're not for that, and all the rest. Then their code of conduct, the uniform they're wearing, the hat they're having on, the badge, the lapel, the oath they've taken, the guns they're having, how professional are they going to be with all these stuff? If we have these three key things together, I think it can form basis of why they need to have some certain awareness, sanitization, and a bit of training program that can actually, make them, be part of the member of the public rather than be partisan to one political ideology or the other. Because any political leader that comes back or that is in power will definitely have an impact in security. If we get it right, thumbs up. If we get it wrong, we're in trouble again. So the question I'm asking all my security officers around the country today is this. Are you ready? Are you prepared to take up the biggest task of the century? Are you ready to take up the biggest task facing us to make sure that we don't see the idea of this popular name or code of whatever they use, Japa. A lot of people are actually running away because they don't see any reason of being Nigerians again.
The Japa phenomenon might be the issue, the socio-economic issues around it might even be different from elections, but
of course,
it's still there are connections one way or the other.
They are all.
So you're saying Papa Alpha Papa.
Yes.
Okay, we've learned a new one now. Papa Alpha Papa.
That's just my keyword for you all.
And Dr. Adamu also taught us being aware and anticipating, and all of that. So you see, we're in classroom.
We are endless learning.
Really interesting.
It's a whole lot because I keep saying one thing that I think we need to really focus on. Whatever we do within the urban area will definitely move down to the local regional areas as well. So if we are ready to do it very well, it starts from the Lagos Neighborhood Safety Corps, the Nigerian police officers in Lagos, the RRS, and other security agencies. They will all have a part to play. Some are going to be controlling the traffic. Some are going to be controlling the member of public. A whole lot of things will definitely play a part. Okay. We can't shy away from, we're going to use this one, we ain't going to use this one. Everyone has got a role, a duty to play. So whatever duty we allow them to play, we should just give them the full support.
Okay.
But before you go, or before I go, or before we all leave the studio today, what exactly are we talking about their life insurance during campaign? We're not even talking about that. And that is a key one. Their normal life insurance or insurance policies is completely different from the campaign. A lot of situations will happen, damages will happen, life will be lost. We might likely lose our security officers, so who pays for the compensation? The National Youth Service Corps, they're going to be there as well. Who pays for their compensation?
You're talking about
in
a
case
special
of any
package.
damages? It should be a special package, which
we
INEC should look into.
We hope people won't be maimed and lives will not be lost during this particular election.
Yeah, that is why the Enlightenment campaign is going on, and we're creating that awareness so we don't lose any lives. Absolutely. But we have to leave it here now. Femi Arato Kwanle, thank you so much.
Thank
Papa
you so much.
Alpha Papa.
Papa Alpha Papa.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's all called Pap.
Right.
When you remember Pap, remember it's called
okay. Pap or custard. Maybe Ogi.
Someone is hungry.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Kabir Adamu, thank you so much for the time this morning. You've really given us a great insight into all of these issues as we prepare for elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Great, great.